we all remember this date last year. Hamas killed over 1,400 Israeli citizens and kidnapped hundreds more for the hostage situation during its terrorist attack on the Jewish state. Now, 1 year later, 97 people are still being held captive, including 4 Americans. And Hamas marked the occasion by firing rockets at Tel Aviv. So here to discuss is Matthew Peterson, editor-in-chief of Blaze News, and Daniel Horowitz. He's the Blaze TV host of Conservative Review. And Daniel, it's 1 year later. So tell us what this has to do with the Americans and why they should still care about this story.
Sure. So, I mean, there's really 2 lessons here for Americans politically. Obviously, number 1 is the secondary civilization jihad that we saw immediately after the attacks. So the reason why this spilled over outside of Israel is because nearly every Western country, ours included, has let in really millions of Islamists from the Middle East through imprudent immigration policies over the past generation. And what, if you remember, to me, what was cathartic was watching how within hours of the attack, it took place on a Saturday. So it was Saturday, Sunday was a weekend. They were out in droves in the streets across our major cities, across Europe. And by the way, this was long before Israel even announced what they were going to do in response. So it wasn't protesting any sort of military maneuvers. It was really a spontaneous celebration of violence that they agreed with. This is why a lot of BLM endorsed it. And it should have been a recognition that we have let in a 5th column into this country. I saw a poll out from a University of Miami professor that said, a year later, they interviewed American Jews. 61% say that they experienced some sort of, anti-Jewish, either attack or maybe, verbal abuse. But what they didn't say is where did that emanate from? Did it suddenly come from the air, from the water? No, I think we know predominantly where it came from. So, Israel is going to do what they're going to do security-wise, but we have a cultural civilization problem right here at home.
Well, Mark Levin joined Glenn Beck earlier today, and they were talking about Kamala Harris and her open hostility towards Benjamin Netanyahu. Let's take a listen.
That is a disgusting statement. She doesn't talk about Xi that way. She doesn't talk about Putin that way. She doesn't talk about that way. She doesn't talk about the Islamo-Nazi who runs Tehran that way. She talks about Netanyahu that way. Why? Because the fact is, and I'll say it, she's evil and she's an anti-Semite. Her father was a Marxist. Her pastor's a Marxist, anti-Israel. I've said it many times, Glenn. If you hate America, you hate Israel. If you hate Israel, you hate America. Why? Because we share this Judeo-Christian belief system. Because the Holy Land is the Holy Land for the Jews and the Christians.
Daniel, break that down for us.
Yeah, I mean, Hamas, in Hebrew means, utter degeneracy, utter violence. It's used at the beginning of Genesis. And those who hate God really rally to that cause. If you look at every left-wing cause globally, there's always some sort of Palestinian angle to it. It could be a global warming event. It could be a transgender thing. It could be a open borders thing. They gravitate to this sort of thing because they know this is God's land and they hate God. That's why pagans have somewhat ironically saddled up to Islamofascism. So I think that's really what's motivating someone like Kamala and her base. But again, I want to be clear for our audience. We don't need to obsess about Israel or mollycoddle them. It's the opposite of Ukraine. Ukraine, we dumped in $200 billion and we can't even figure out what we got for it. With Israel, it's a matter of, I think we've seen the last couple of weeks what they've done to Iran and Hezbollah. Just let them do their thing, stay out of it. We focus on our border. We focus on Western North Carolina. The problem is this administration is obsessed with funding Hezbollah and Hamas. It's this bizarre obsession. So rather than Republicans having these feel-good, vacuous resolutions on Israel, what they needed to have done is to cut off all funding to the so-called Palestinians, to Lebanon, which is run by Hezbollah, to the UN, which we now found out is their direct Hamas personnel and Hezbollah personnel working for them. So this is really a very easy issue for us. And just one more point, I didn't get to the second point to learn. One thing that hasn't been discussed all year in mass media is that these communities around the Gaza envelope were extremely left-wing. I mean, so much so that they lived there. They would bring in Arabs from Gaza to Israeli hospitals. They had all this sort of coexist stuff. You know, the people you see in your neighborhood with the coexist bumper sticker, that was the demographic that lived there. They even hired workers. Think about foreign workers from a culture that is hostile to your own. They brought them in. They were able to bring back to Hamas the locations of the safe homes, the safe rooms, exactly the layout of each town and community so they could come in and attack. Now, it was a tragic lesson, but from everything I hear, the Israeli left has learned its lesson and they're united behind Netanyahu's mission. The sad question for us and the ominous question is, what is it going to take for our people to wake up?
Daniel, I'm glad you made this last point. I think it's really important that people understand at this point, even if you're the most hardest core Israeli supporter, should want America to lay off of Israel and allow Israel to do whatever it wants to do. And so this is America first, right? Is saying let Israel do what it wants to do because we come over there and we smother everyone with our love, right? And try to control both sides, almost like this sort of octopus, right? Where we're giving money to everyone. And I'm very sensitive to that meme where it shows the rockets going off and it's like somehow my tax dollars paid for both of these, right? I'm paying for all sides of this war. But in this situation, is it fair to say, I mean, Israel's fine if everyone there is now behind this, even the left is behind taking action, they're going to do what they're going to do. And so at this point, the conservative position is let that be. Let that happen and stay out of their way, and also stop trying to meddle on all sides in this complicated situation where you got a lot of Ivy League kids who, we got to make Iran, we've got to be friendly with them, and we have to do this and that. I'm kind of the opinion, and maybe it's just my ignorance, but I'm kind of like, let's just back the hell off and out.
We have about 60 seconds, Daniel.
Exactly. I mean, look at what they accomplished. They knocked out so many of the Iranian and Hezbollah assets that were responsible for attacking our Marines in the 1980s that we didn't clean up. Yep. They did more to the Houthis, by the way, than we've done all year with them blocking the shipping lanes. The bottom line is they have it covered, but it's worse than us trying to hamstring them, Matt. What we're doing is we leave our troops precariously flung out in Syria and Iraq for reasons only Allah knows, protecting the Iranians from the Sunni insurgency. That would be their problem. We just, we just bombed the Sunnis in Syria for them again. And then the Israelis are hamstrung because you're harming our assets. You're inflaming tensions around our embassy. Well, get the hell out of there. Focus on our border. Let them do theirs and we'll both be happy.